Welcome along, everybody. Great to have you all back for our fifth session in our Capable Councillors Leadership set of topics, I suppose it is. And it's been going really well. I had some awesome feedback from different people, which is fantastic. And I hope each of you are finding some value as we go through the different topics as well. And tonight is one of my sort of more favorite areas, talking about feedback specifically. Feedback is a really important aspect of how we all grow. And that's why it's a really key leadership topic for us to get. And tonight we've got Paz along. You see her on the screen there. She's going to join us from Melbourne, Australia's coffee capital. Though I have to say I was doing some Zoom sessions with some Canberra people and also some Melbourne people. There was a bit of a tiff on about Canberrarians reckon that Canberra might have the drop on Melbourne for coffee now, but I think it must be just a vicious rumor. I'm not sure about that. We'll see about that anyhow when we go. I'm just going to send that message to you all there. That's really good. And let's dive into things. As per normal, feel free to jump in if you've got any questions, answers, anything you want to ask about. Use the chat box if you need to, and feel free to query us on any of the topics we've got going on. So that's where we are tonight, 8th to 6th. We've just got one more week to go. Next week's our last week. It's about communication. Certainly for anybody thinking about, well, communication can help us all, but anyone thinking about running for election or nominating at this stage too, the communication topic will be very, very, very relevant. And certainly if you want to work with the community and work with council, communications are pretty much a pivotal thing for that. So we can look forward to that next week. Tonight we've got Paz along. She's sitting there on the screen. Thanks very much again, Paz, for that. I'll do a full intro on you a little bit later. And next week we've got Rich Evans to support us. So back tonight, we're going to talk quickly about mentoring and coaching as a tool for change, because that is usually heavily impacted by feedback, which is why we're moving into the feedback space as well. So giving and receiving feedback, and then a particular important thing, which is active listening. Active listening lets us have better relationships with people that we need to work with, and particularly lets us mentor and coach people specifically. And it's a really big part of communication, which we're going to talk about next week as well. You'll notice I've changed the slides there from same thinking, same problems to new mindset, new results. Hopefully everybody's picked up one or two things out of the course along the way, which enhances where they're already at on the many topics, which are pretty common knowledge to people. But just think about tweaking that and moving forward, which is what my kind of checklist of stuff is that we're going through now. The curiosity, hopefully curiosity is paying dividends for you. We're doing lots and lots of leadership with different groups at the moment. And curiosity keeps coming up as a way to beat being judgmental. It's a way to build stronger relationships because we ask more probing, interesting questions from people. And it's really helps us engage with the different things. The opposite of curiosity is kind of being quite judgmental, which means we pigeonhole things very, very quickly. And once we've done that, we don't really look for any new solutions around that aspect. We just move on to the next thing. And we really might be bypassing an opportunity because of that as well. Hopefully, the strengths list we've been working on is also playing out in your life and playing a bigger part in your day, your relationships and your work. And you're finding that that's really, just again, incrementally more value as you focus around what you're awesome at and you learn to grow those skills and you leverage those skills with the people that you're working with, which is pretty much the bottom thing there, which we talked about last week, stakeholders and customers. Are you noticing change in your relationship? Now you've got a kind of new, probably more objective, maybe more planned view about who you're working with, who's on your radar, who can make your day go better, who can make your day go worse, and how we think about arranging how we deal with those people and having a bit of a strategy to make that work as well. So that was our last week's topic. So session 4, if you want to review that video as you would have along the way. So diving into tonight's stuff, again, I like to kick off with this particular leadership slide here. Hopefully all of us are finding ways, and it'll be just subtle things in the way we speak, the way we spend time, the way we maybe invest some time to deal with people and take those who we can along with a bit of a ride, inspire them to a certain extent, lead them towards their goals. We've probably all been doing it with our kids particularly. And, Rolly's on a long journey. He's got a real nipper on his knee there at the moment. But across the life, they'll be very influenced by their parents. We know that that's very true. And then you guys are all always influencing and more than likely mentoring other people in your work and world spheres through your behaviors, through the things that you do. And you can take people down and you can tear things up, or we can lift things up and we can lift people up. And that's the real opportunity we've got here. And if you see yourself not doing that, it's a great time to check and kind of reposition yourself to make things work better. So tonight, the core concept is about kind of feedback and why we might need feedback. And I wanted to kick off with this slide, and particularly the Simon Sinek quote. The Dalai Lama, I think, has already made a quote around this space as well. It's a really important thing. We don't, excuse me, we don't learn much when everything goes right, and we learn lots and lots of stuff when things are going badly. And it's a kind of cruel thing, nearly, that when things are going badly and you're feeling down and things are not performing in your world the way you would want them to, but it's the most spectacular time to learn more stuff, to take a look at what's going on in your world, to make some change and to move forward from that. And usually we might be looking to the world, to organizations, to friends for feedback in those particular instances, which can move us into a new place. If anybody was thinking about running in the council space, you're going to find that you're going to get lots of feedback in lots of different ways. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And not all of it will be for you. And so I'll talk about that in 1 second as well. So feedback can come from all sorts of places. Feedback is a critical tool and a critical kind of communication in everybody's journey. And one of the things that they talk about a little bit today is that some kids, not going to say all kids, but some kids at school over maybe the last 10 years or so are lacking a little bit of resilience because they really haven't had any kind of critiquing feedback or constructive criticism in terms of feedback. It's always been, pat on the back, gold star, gee, you're doing great work. Wow, you turned up at school this week. Here's a certificate for that. And that's not really learning a lot of impactful stuff at that particular point. So everything's going right, and we're just getting a pat on the back for that. There's not a lot of reflective learning going on. So when we do get constructive feedback about things that we could change, opportunities we could address and do those things, it has a massive potential personal benefit for it if we choose to buy into it. Now, it's true, and right at the bottom of that list there, accepting feedback is optional for any individual. And certainly nobody here should think that feedback is always going to be relevant and pertinent to their particular situation. And there is a quote, I think it's a Franklin D. Roosevelt quote about being in the arena, man in the arena, so it could be a woman in the arena as well. But people who are out doing it, whatever it is, certainly should give feedback to each other, but you should be very careful about taking feedback from people who are spectating, that don't have skin in the game, so to speak, and do that. If we talk about Brene Brown, she talks about vulnerability in that very space, about being vulnerable and open and sharing and empathetic and getting feedback from the people who are there on the floor with you in the arena, as it would be, and being very careful not to take on mischievous feedback, which could be coming from the stand. So we're going to talk about how that kind of plays out for us as well. Without feedback, there'd be no change. Feedback is an incentive and opportunity to change, so that's a really positive thing about it. Feedback is as a leader, feedback is one of the most difficult things you'll have to do, because there's going to be times when feedback is not really being asked for, and there might be all sorts of barriers to kind of giving it. But if we don't share the feedback in a constructive and planned and thought through kind of way, whatever the issue was that's going along on our team, in our life, with our family, wherever it might be, is going to continue on. And that, if it's not meeting the goals of our values or our organization, is not going to really serve us very well. So we need to think about that. Final bit on this slide, which I think is really important, is feedback is an opportunity, because feedback can be very motivating when people get the message and understand the message and it's constructive and it's forward facing. That can really help people change what they're doing. They can run faster, throw further, dig deeper, whatever the things they might be doing. It can be quite motivating. The fact that you sit down and share feedback with people can be a real trust building exercise as well, because people generally, when they think about getting feedback, think they're going to be critiqued in some way, but it doesn't always have to be like that. So the fact that you're there, you take an open-minded growth mindset style approach to giving the feedback, you can use it as an opportunity to build trust with your colleagues that you're sharing that kind of feedback with. And that's a two-way street. So that's really powerful. The final thing about feedback is it can definitely create opportunities for growth. And people use coaches specifically to improve their health, to improve their well-being, to improve how fast they run, to improve how high they fly, to improve a whole bunch of things. And all of those things, at whatever level we're doing them, can be really powerful at taking us on that journey to where we would rather be, or where we can fulfill our potential, which is kind of what this quote's all about at the end of the day. So there's a number of different ways we kind of use feedback, and two places where that they obviously have a very, very big home is in what we call coaching. So if you're in an organization, we particularly might coach people to enhance their ability to do a specific job. If we're in a sporting realm, we definitely would coach people on their goal kicking capability. And one of the coolest stories out of the World Cup last year for the Matildas was that the Matildas coached their people, all of their people, to be penalty shooters. And very, very few other teams, and in fact, the team that I can't remember who was might have been England, that they won over at that particular game. They only coached the first 5 people in their team to be penalty shooters, but everybody on the Matildas could shoot a penalty shot under pressure. That was a unique thing. It was a competitive advantage for them in that particular time, and they specifically coached for that attribute for their team. And they do it in a number of different ways. And so the Matildas represent, through the way they coach and organize themselves, a big depth of talent on how they get stuff done. So sometimes we want to coach to improve performance. Sometimes we want to coach to build our robustness and maybe even our confidence at taking on competitors, as would be in the smart space. So coaching is specifically a process of relationship building and setting goals. It's about a dialogue of making people aware of a particular set of circumstances and then driving into action around those particular set of circumstances particularly. Coaching is very specifically goal-driven. So again, with the Matildas, they might have coached their team to say that, the top 9 people in the team are going to be able to shoot penalties under pressure situations during a live game in extra time. And everyone on the field at the time will be able to do that, which is, I think, one of the rules that they need to have. And they might have set up some goals around that 9 out of 10 shots will be successful against, a world-class goalie, for example. And they work hard to do that. In the first month, they get half that way. The next month, they get 3/4 that way. And by the third month, they're actually doing 9 out of 10 shots into the goal box very easily. And so coaching is very goal-driven, and we use those goals. At each time we're moving towards those goals, we're giving feedback, which is why feedback is a kind of a core underpinning thing. Coaching also specifically aims a very narrow band of things. So if you need to get change in someone you're working with at work, team member, colleague, whatever it might be, we also pick not 10 things to solve at once, but we pick 1 or 2 things, and probably just one thing. And we work people towards that one piece of change behavior that we like to have. Coaching is definitely time bound, so we're going to have an end result for that. And the good side to that is, I guess, if we've got someone we are coaching and we're looking for them to get to a certain level of performance and they don't make that certain level of performance, then we need a new plan. We need a new way to deal with that kind of outcome as well. So coaching is interesting like that. Interactions is planned and structured. We'll meet daily, we meet weekly, we meet at 3:00 on Friday afternoons. We do all those kind of things. And we literally have an intervention around a set of goals to change people's behavior. Lots and lots of feedback coming and going in that particular space around coaching. It's a quote here from an American NFL coach, Tom Landry. He's pretty famous in America, but I like the components of it, which I think is really valuable to thinking about why we'd use coaching and the realities of feedback in that space there. A coach is someone who tells you what you don't want to hear. So things that you're not really, on purposely open for. And again, part of the leadership's role is to make more people open to understand some of the opportunities, who has you see what you don't want to see. And maybe that's looking at some of our weaknesses and quotes and stuff like that. And then so you can be who you always known you could be. So it helps you meet your aspirations at an individual level, at a sports person's level. I think that's a kind of really valuable way to look at how coaching and particularly feedback can drive that process. Excuse me. The other tool which we use in a far more informal sense and on a much usually longer time scale is mentoring. It's highly likely all of you have either formal mentor relationships or informal mentoring relationships. And they could be in all different parts of your life. And mentoring is kind of a more complex thing, while coaching is quite directed, goal-driven, time-orientated. I always see mentoring as a bit more of a kind of group hug or a warm hug. So it's bringing people in, it's giving them a range of options to change where they're at. So you might be a bit unhappy with your horse riding. So someone who's a really excellent horse ride might necessarily coach you, but they're there, they watch you, you watch them, you learn a lot from them. It might go on for maybe years in your life to change your horse riding style in that particular case as well. it's likely in very different careers that we've all had on this page here, in this group here, that we've taken advantage of mentors in different roles, and they've guided us to, oh, why don't you go and do this course here? So a bit of training. Oh, why don't you go and meet these other people because they're really clever in this space here as well. And that kind of networking, connective thing is very valuable. And again, we're looking to change behavior. So leaders want to know about how can we change behavior, because where we are today is not where we need to be tomorrow. So we want to move and change behavior towards those kind of spaces as well. So feedback again in the mentoring role is both central and it's a more ongoing thing. Many people have, and I have, mentoring style relationships which have been going for well over 20 years or so. They're people you don't maybe touch base with every single day, but when you see them, there's a really kind of warm conversation. They've been kind of monitoring you from afar. Maybe you've been monitoring them from afar. And it's always helpful to run into those people and just to help ground you out or get some track or have some expertise in a particular kind of vertical area where you might be struggling or believing that you can do more in that space. So mentoring is also a really important change tool and often driven by feedback as well. A couple of cool quotes about mentoring. Mentor is not someone who walks ahead of us and tells us how they did it, but a mentor is someone who walks alongside of us and guides us on what we can do. So that kind of a quality aspect of mentoring, I think, is super, super important rather than being dragged along and told where to go. That fact that they're there with us step for step as it might be to make things happen, I think is super valuable and a great way to look at that. And, you know, when you've got someone who you think you can help and guide and take on that leadership journey with you, walking beside them rather than dragging them along or pushing them from behind might be a more valuable way to cement that relationship. A little bit of an Oprah one for Oprah fans there. A mentor is someone who allows you to see the hope inside yourself. So mentors are helping unpack unpack your life, see the potential in all humans. All humans have lots of potential, and it's an exciting thing to see people moving towards their potential and reaching towards their potential. And under that leadership definition, we can be all part of facilitating that journey, and other people are facilitating that for us as well. So that's pretty cool. Moving back into the feedback space particularly, but also very related to coaching and mentoring, is the concept of being able to communicate well with people. We're going to talk about communications in a lot more depth next week, but this part of it I have in this particular deck because it really impacts the way we can develop relationships with people to be a coach or mentor them, and specifically how to give and get feedback from people as well. And the key part of this page is about active listening, and we're going to jump out in a second and watch a video about that. Active listening is consciously putting yourself in the moment, and we'll talk about mindfulness and being in the moment when we get back from the video as well, but being totally focused on what's happening in front of you there, all of your body, to listen and understand. So 2 ears usually would mean you can hear twice as much, you should speak twice, you should sort of listen twice as much as you should speak, but your eyes and other sensations that we can use to understand what's going on here and be better informed than if we were remote and moved, not attached to what's going on. So let's jump out to the video, have a quick watch of that, and then we'll come back here and have a few more discussions. That'll be that one there.
Many of us don't listen to other people. Instead, we just think and wait for our turn to express our own opinion. Take a step back and look at your colleagues' conversations. It's likely it'll look more like two monologues where everyone tells about themselves. The cure for it is active listening. It's a very powerful skill. It brings people closer, builds trust, and helps people to open up. Here are 5 steps on how to do it. 1. Stay focused. Keep natural eye contact, don't judge, and be patient. 2. Really listen. Don't think about your similar experiences and what you should tell next. 3. Allow for periods of silence. Wait till the other person speaks again. 4. From time to time, repeat the other person's words or paraphrase it back to them. It will reassure that you really listen and encourage them to open up. 5. Understand the emotions behind the words. When you paraphrase, also try to express the other feelings back to them. Active listening is rather difficult and can be more tiring than talking itself. Be prepared for long conversations. On the other hand, you will gain trust and people will simply like to spend time with you. You will also understand them much better. At the beginning, try it with your spouse or a good friend. You'll see how great they feel after talking to you. If you want to learn more about optimal lifestyle, subscribe to our channel below.
Pull that up there. Thank you very much. Hopefully get a little bit out of that video. It's a cool thing, but it does take a lot of energy to be an active listener. And in, excuse me, most parts of our lives, we are hugely distracted. And probably the most dangerous distractive device we've got, which is in most people's hands most of the time, is their mobile phone. And if you're having a conversation with anybody else who's waving their phone around in front of you, you know that they're not actively listening to you. They're waiting for the next ding, bell, flash of their phone, and they're fully distracted from things. So if you want to have a serious conversation, and when we're talking about mentoring, coaching, and specifically the delivering or the receiving of feedback, you want to be kind of in the moment, using all of your senses to understand what's happening there. So you don't jump to conclusions, so we can take a breath, so we can leverage our emotional intelligence and get the maximum out of what that other person has probably kind of gone out of their way a little bit to share with you about different things. So a bunch of things on the circle there, you can see it. Lots of different things going on. Part of the listening thing is carefully reiterating what the other person has said to you to make sure that you're on the same wavelength in terms of what they're talking about and not misinterpreting things. So asking questions, clarifying, paraphrasing, see if they agree, looking for the head nodding, looking for the feedback mechanisms on those things to make active listening actually work for you as well. Down the bottom of the page, people who are into meditation, yoga, those kind of things will be very familiar with mindfulness and sort of being in the moment, two things which are slightly different but largely the same and very useful in this space to us as well. And if we're having a serious relationship, or we really are serious about sharing the ideas we've got about, you know, improvement or change or whatever else it is, then we should really make sure we're in the moment. We're not distracted. We're not in a maybe overly busy, noisy environment. We're not trying to do 10 other things at that moment. And to that end, when we want to listen to people, we should really control that environment to an extent where it's not any sort of power play environment, but it's the best environment to facilitate the conversation we want to have between the two people. So being present, being in the moment, being not distracted, turning computers off, turning phones off, turning emails off if it's in an office location as well, and being focused on right now rather than what's going to happen next. And sometimes around feedback, we might be fussing about what's going to happen next to make things happen as well. So hopefully there's some really interesting points for you there to think about how this is going to play out in terms of our feedback tool as well, or tools as it would be. So why feedback matters. It's a quote from Malcolm Gladwell up the top there. His book called The Outliers, really, really interesting read or listen if you're into that kind of stuff. It's on my book reading list at the end of the deck as well. His research has shown that people are very motivated by the fact that what they're doing matters. And I've seen some research from Google on their high performance teams, and there's 5 things that make a massive difference to how people engage in their teams. One of them is psychological contracts. That's about safety and trust in the workplace. The 2 others which are important here are meaning and impact, that people are doing stuff that has meaning to them and that they feel like they're making a difference. And if you're working with people who don't feel like they have meaning in their work and don't feel like they're making an impact with what they do, it's going to be really, really tricky to, you know, engage them in the team and in the vision and the mission and the things that we want to have going on. So we want to kind of recruit for that. We want people to work in a space where they've got a lot of energy and probably built-in motivation to do work. And sometimes when we're really strong about, you know, our vision, mission, and what we want to do here, our purpose and values, it's much, much easier to attract the right people than if we're a bit vague about that or we don't communicate that stuff very well to us as well. So motivated by the knowledge that what we do matters is important. So then feedback about what we do and that it is mattering and that it has impact and that it's got meaning is super important as well if you want to have a functional performance-based team or colleagues or as it might be as well. So 2 types of feedback on the slide that we can talk about. First one is taking feedback on the front foot. And proactive feedback, I will routinely tell you how you're doing, and I'll routinely ask how I'm doing. So that two-way street. And it's probably unlikely that anyone today has been asked by their manager. They may have had some feedback from a manager, but their manager probably didn't ask them how they were doing in their job as well. And so feedback upstream and downstream in the organization can be a little bit more tricky. And I've got some other examples about that as we go on. But in our perfect world, we want to be able to give feedback and we want to be open to receiving it, because that's our opportunity to grow as well when we're receiving feedback. Second one is reactive feedback, and there's probably a lot more of this goes on in the workplace. I only give you feedback in response to an adverse event. So depending on what adverse event looks like, it's probably a problem or a mistake or a failure of some sort. And that's when I'm going to jump up and talk to you about what's going on there. It's unlikely, or it's less likely to be kind of constructive feedback. It's more likely to be chastising feedback. And again, as a human, I'm kind of putting up the barriers when I start to get chastising feedback and go, well, actually, I'm not sure I'm asking for this, and I'm not sure I understand why I'm getting that. So we really want to be in the proactive feedback place where we're routinely, and giving feedback in small increments on a regular basis is far easier than having a full-blown meltdown about a particular issue, which is unlikely to end well for all the people involved in it. This guy here, another awesome read if you're into some of the books. He's on my reading list as well, but James Clear's Atomic Habits. Really interesting, again, what's going on. One of his quotes, which I love, is that early feedback is usually better than late criticism. And you see this all the time, that someone could have stepped into the breach, someone could have stepped into the void and offered just, 2 cents worth of ideas around something that was clearly going pear-shaped, but they've chosen not to. They're sitting on their hand. Quoting Jessica Hickman, they're not being an upstander, even at that small feedback level. And things go south and south and south until it becomes a really big problem. And out of that, people lose promotions, people lose their jobs. We have lots of problems with late criticism and when it could have been nipped in the bud. So we want our leaders to be proactive, stepping up, stepping forward to making that one out as well. Other parts of this, delaying the conversation or stringing someone along with indirect feedback won't make them feel better once the real issue is finally addressed. And nobody likes getting bad news, but everybody appreciates clarity around that. Even if you've done the wrong thing, even if it's not looking really good, actually nailing that, getting that behind you gives you an opportunity to move forward and move on in whatever space that might be as well. So feedback in terms of early feedback, better than late criticism. Love it. It's a really interesting point in terms of how that one works out as well. Timing of feedback, really important. And sliding on from the end of that point, feedback should not be left. If you work for an organization, I know at least one person does here, they do an annual performance review. And certainly in the CSU case where that does happen, it's 51 weeks of not much going on. And then there's 1 week of flurry of activity, checking data, checking goals, checking what you agreed to, finding some evidence to support that you actually did something, and highly stressful already for a 1 hour meeting with your manager, which comes and goes in a second, and then you move on to the next year's results. It's not very productive. It's not very useful. And what we're looking for in terms of feedback is stuff which happens as close to the moment where we see both good news or bad news maybe unfolding for that person, that activity, that project as it might be as well. So as close to the thing that we see that needs feedback, we should be aiming to deliver it. The only time you should really delay that is sometimes feedback needs to be planned. It needs to be maybe scheduled or diarized. It needs to have some backup evidence associated with it. And we certainly don't want to go into feedback shooting from the hip, guns blazing, about stuff that particularly we may not have witnessed ourselves. It's just come from a third party or other parties. And we want to actually plan that feedback and have a feedback-based intervention if it's about changing behavior that can be really useful for both parties involved, so that we know that we're not addressing that problem down the track as well. Two other types of feedback: supportive feedback. This is us giving feedback that supports the desired behaviors. So if an organization's got a particular set of values, we want to reward people on meeting those, but we also want to provide constructive feedback on where they're not meeting those particular values. And we don't want to be just paying lip service to that. We want to actually deliver on that and anchor back it. And when your organization has vision, mission, purpose, values, they are a great place to get people to reflect on their behaviors and the things that they do, and and meet the goals for the organisation on those fronts as well. Sometimes we'll have to focus on corrective feedback, and we've done a lot of work with dairy farmers, and dairy farmers particularly don't wear helmets on quad bikes and ride around their farms chasing cattle. And often their employers see owners and managers not doing the helmet wearing thing, and they think, oh, it's okay, I don't have to wear a helmet either. But everybody on a farm has a responsibility to wear a helmet on a quad bike. And so what you're looking for in that case there is corrective feedback, and it's going to be delivered pretty quickly in the moment after you've observed it happen. And it's important because you want to see that behavior change, because you have a responsibility, not to more kind of moral responsibility, to be able to send that person home at night, not resulting from an accident or any sort of issues that might associate with that. So corrective stuff can often be about feedback and where there's dangers involved that could affect the health and well-being of the people you're working with and staff. Generally, as leaders, you want to be looking about supportive feedback. This is good. This can be better. I wonder. We're going to talk about that one in a second as we go through it as well. Some of the aspects of constructive feedback would be focusing on one single issue at a time. And in my personal life, I'm a little bit recalcitrant probably and poor at this, but I tend to let a few things build up over time with different things or people and start a list. And then I might, lacking a bit of emotional intelligence, explode about that as it would be. But if you're being proactive about giving feedback, then you want to just pick up on things as they roll along and be part of that regular routine kind of feedback about, oh yeah, that was an awesome outcome. That's really good. Wow, I think we could do that one better next time, and keep moving forward. If you come with a list of 10 things, the person that you're giving the feedback to is likely to be quite confronted by that. They may not have imagined the 10 things as you've imagined the 10 things. And suddenly you've got a big barrier between the people, two people working together, and actually people getting value out of that as well. One of the things that sort of happens in this space, people talk about the feedback sandwich. Has anyone heard of a feedback sandwich? So it's a flawed concept to me. I don't like it at all, because there's going to be something tasty on each side of it, and there's something that's going to be not so tasty in the middle of it. But you're left with a positive thing at the end of the day, and really that might devalue the actual really important feedback that needed to be gained in the middle. So I've got a couple of models which I'll show you about in a second. And if it was a sandwich full of many layers of different feedback, it might be actually quite hard to choke down, as it would be as well. We talked about timely, very important. Focus on observable actions or behaviors. This is super important. If you come to somebody and go, oh, old mate over there tells me that you haven't been doing this, this, and this, well, they're going to go, well, who's the other person there? What's going on? What did they know about things? And did they hear it from someone else? So in the feedback situation, we want to be really close to the game, and we want to, even if we haven't seen this and we've heard about it, as a good leader, we want to probably go onto the floor, find out where this action's actually happening or failing or not working as well as we should, or deserves a really good reward, and see it with our own eyes. Because feedback, when you've observed it and when you're going to comment on it and maybe critique it to a certain extent, is way more valuable, way more trust inspiring than if it becomes from a third party, or it's about hearsay, or it's rumor. And we see lots of stuff on Facebook particularly, and other social media channels, where people are often critiquing something they know really nothing about. They don't know nothing of the context or the circumstances associated with it. And it just blows up into an ugly storm of usually nothing much of value for anybody. So if you've got areas where you want to reward or provide positive or constructive feedback to people, set yourself up as a leader so you can actually see that unfold, work out how to make that happen, and get on the floor and find out where it's going to happen, and be part of it. That will definitely help build the relationship with the people that you're working with as well. We won't get into it tonight, but when we do give feedback, often we want to focus on a particular outcome of that feedback. And there's a particular model. One's called GROW. That's one we deal with quite a bit. It's just GROW. And GROW stands for goal, reality. So what's happening around that particular goal or the behavior that we've seen. And then we do this in collaboration with the person or the team, whoever's receiving the feedback. We look at the options. So what different ways could we solve this problem? And again, we're collaborating on this. So the person who's maybe receiving the feedback is right up to their neck into designing a new goal, moving forward, the realities of their world, the options that they maybe have in front of them. And then the last thing we leave them with out of that model is called the way forward. So everybody agrees that maybe this behavior is not acceptable and our way forward is to do X, Y, and Z. And we're going to work with that. We're going to monitor that. We're going to touch base on that. And we're going to make those things all come together for us as we make it happen. So feedback, super valuable, and ways to make it sticky, even better value for us as well. Perfect. I've got another short video, which we'll watch in a second. I've got two models here, which we can quickly talk about as ways that you can probably be more generous with your feedback and more productive with the feedback that you might give. This one here is cool. It's called situation behavior impact and then behavior impact. So that's the BI on the end of it. And what we're talking about here is we have an event, circumstance, something going on. It has a range of things about it which are very factual. We can understand them. We can look at it. We can check it. We can do that. But then we have behaviors. Behaviors are less predictable. It's very hard to, and what we see in the video here is that one behavior can mean one thing to one person and it can mean something quite different to another person. And that might be both positive or it might be negative in that space as well. And that's the impact. So that made me feel like, or that made me do this or whatever is going on. And so using the model, then we go, oh, well, this is the situation. This is what we experience, behavior and impact. What about an alternative behavior and an alternative impact? And that really sets us up to be more, again, productive, a new way forward, a new behavior which reflects possibly our organizational vision, mission, values, and that kind of stuff, and a more positive impact out of the particular situation. Just going to duck out to that video and got to get out of that one first. Stop that. Thank you. And this one here. Let's have a listen to this one.
Leaders need feedback to become stronger leaders, but they don't often get the feedback they need, nor do they give the feedback others need to improve their skills. Everyone in the workplace is different, and we experience the behavior of our coworkers in different ways. Sometimes, another person's actions can affect us in a way that makes it harder to work well together. In these situations, we often don't let our colleagues know about their impact on us. Conversely, sometimes a coworker's actions are very helpful or motivating, but we don't take the time to communicate specifically what he or she did that made the work go well. Giving feedback can be tricky. That's why we often shy away from it. But a method called Situation Behavior Impact, or SBI for short, can help you gather and give specific, constructive feedback to strengthen effectiveness in your work with others. First, it's important to understand what feedback is. Feedback is different from criticism or praise. Feedback is about observation. It is timely and specific. It describes, but does not judge. SBI helps you deliver and receive feedback in a specific way. Here's how to give feedback according to the SBI method. The first step in SBI is to get permission to give feedback. That's as simple as saying, "May I give you feedback?" Then describe the situation. When and where something occurred. Make sure you are specific in describing the situation. For example, in the meeting today, when you made a proposal for your unit to take the lead on the next steps of the project, then describe the behavior that had an effect on you. Again, make sure you are specific in describing the behavior. It isn't helpful if you are vague or general in your description. For example, you said that my unit would provide the materials by next Wednesday. Finally, describe the impact the behavior had on you. This part of the statement describes your emotional response and is particular to you. For example, when you made that commitment for my unit, I felt disrespected because you hadn't asked me in advance if it was possible to meet such a tight time frame. Or, when you made that commitment for my unit, I felt complimented that you trusted me to get it done on such a tight time frame. As you can see, different people can experience the same behavior in very different ways. Specific feedback can help leaders draw helpful conclusions from this information and decide how they may or may not want to adjust their practices as a result. In Situation Behavior Impact, How you receive this information is as important as how it is delivered. Here are some do's and don'ts for receiving feedback. Do: ask for feedback about specific events or actions and the impact your behavior had on the person's ability to do the work well. Focus on hearing and understanding the feedback. Express appreciation for the information. Give yourself time to process what you have heard and decide what to do. Don't try to explain what you were trying to do or why. Minimize or dismiss what you have heard. Discount or deflect unexpected or uninvited feedback about your positive impact on someone. Get angry or withdraw in the face of unexpected or uninvited feedback about your negative impact on someone. To encourage people you work with to give helpful feedback, make sure you give SBI feedback frequently and ask for it from time to time. You can pass out a simple SBI form during meetings, for example, and ask that people fill it out. Take the time to fill out SBI forms for others. Using the form may be helpful in getting your team used to giving feedback in this way. After a short time of using the form, you may find that you can easily give SBI and don't need the form to help convey your feedback. When you review other people's SBI forms together, look for patterns and decide what adjustments in your practice might contribute to the work going well. Learn more about situation behavior impact and other tools for results-based leadership at www.aecf.org.
There you go. So that's another possible opportunity in terms of giving feedback and receiving feedback. The video is quite good in terms of mapping your way through it. I think, again, likely in your own experiences, the opportunities to give feedback are not widely encouraged. Meetings finish, people move on, everyone's busy with the next thing. But certainly there could be a lot learnt from just spending a few moments giving some feedback, even in a less formal sense at the end of meetings, and building into the culture of the meetings or the conversations you have that we do give feedback, and it's a two-way street, people sharing that. And then you get very comfortable with it. New people on your team adopt it, and then we find ourselves learning lots more because of the feedback that's being shared between the people that are involved in it as well. This one is kind of my favorite because it's a super easy feedback model. School teachers use it a lot, I believe. Definitely I crossed over it into the education system. And it's a really, really simple statement. I like something that you do. And a second part of that is I wonder. So I wonder is about asking a question. So I like the way that you've presented this assignment to me. I wonder if you did some more spell checking, whether the outcome would be better on that. So a student who maybe doesn't do a lot of spelling as it would be as well. It's a super simple mechanism, and it's not so confrontational, I think, with people, because it's about you wondering. You're not saying do this, make this happen, change your ways, make that. I wonder if that could happen for you as well. So I wonder's good. I'm going to give you a little bit of homework for next week to try this out on friends or colleagues in the next period of time as a way to both seek and get some feedback on your behaviors, their behaviors, whatever else might be going on in that space also. So heading towards the end of my section 2, so receiving feedback as a leader or a coach. Often we see, and I heard a story just last week of anyone's heard of a 360-degree survey. So this one was done live, and it's where you ask your workers to rate you, maybe give you some feedback on your behavior. You might also have your manager there. In this case here, they had a manager of the manager that was there, and they met on a Teams meeting. And the 360 says it's an open, trusting environment. Everybody can contribute their ideas back and we can all learn from it. This meeting went for about just under 10 minutes. There was no feedback from team members. And clearly in that case, there's an element of fear or lack of trust in them participating in giving feedback to their manager in front of their manager's manager as well. So there could be two barriers there. So there's a big power imbalance in that space. And the managers left the meeting going, oh yeah, it's all good because no one's got anything bad to say, or no one's got anything, different to what we believe we're doing. And they go on doing whatever they're doing, and the team's just left there going, gosh, I wish I should have opened my mouth, but I didn't want to lose my job today. So it's a problem for us. So all of us as leader managers need to be open to feedback And some of the questions we can ask sit on the screen here as well. So we could ask our teams and our employees and the people we work with, hey, how can I support you better? Is there things that you need to get your job done better? I've got a lot of experience in this area. Can I provide you some more guidance in that? Are we doing things differently? Are we doing things right? Can I behave differently? Do you want me to get in early? Should we meet earlier? Should I speak less at meetings? Whatever it might be to make that one happen. People these days, and particularly some of the younger generations, are really interested in promotions and movements and all those kind of things. So am I giving you enough opportunities is probably a really important question, rather than, keeping you tied down in a role, maybe not giving you the opportunities to explore or be curious or learn new things as well. Am I doing anything that is hindering your performance? And I guess at different times we might perceive that, and we might have lots of perceptions here which may or may not be real, but at least if we can discuss them, or if people can flag them with us, we can at least have a crack at being a better leader through the feedback that we're giving as well. And in the second last question there, which is, am I giving you enough feedback? I think largely that would be kind of no for most people, because again, feedback is we're very busy, time poor people. There's a reluctance in organizations and in amongst, even definitely amongst managers and to a certain extent leaders, to give lots of feedback. So there's really an upside opportunity to make feedback part of the daily workplace diet, and sharing that in a kind of a positive way. And I think that case, and just crossing back into our capable councillors mode thing particularly, one of the things that's happened in our region is that the council has had a ramp up in the feedback that it's been given from ratepayers in different parts of the community over and above what they would normally expect. And they've really struggled to cope with what that means, or how to take that on board, or how to respond to that. And all of us as leaders need to put ourselves in the position that we might get some more feedback, and we might have to, take it on board and do some stuff. And what are we going to do with it? And so again, as leaders, being more forward-thinking, visionary, wanting to bring people together and wanting to initiate kind of shared goals, I think that's probably the opportunity to make feedback a more living, breathing part of our working lives, and being prepped for it. And really, again, in the Bathurst Regional Council situation, feedback should be perceived as valuable rather than confrontational in terms of things that are going on. So people who do get to jump up and run, and people who get re-elected in this next round of elections, in the perfect world, they'll become more astute to feedback and more, capable and more positive about the benefits that feedback can bring to the way we're doing it. Question for you guys: are you as open to receiving feedback as you are to giving it, you think? Where do you see yourselves on that front?
Oh, definitely. I think there's a paucity of feedback. So I'm often seeking how I can do something better, which is sort of like critique. And that's, good and bad feedback. I guess quality feedback is what you're chasing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's right. And in your particular profession, feedback might be a bit difficult because there's a bit of a strata and an ecosystem to how people work in that space, is there?
Yeah, in general practice, it's really difficult to get feedback because basically no one ever sits in with you. They try and do that, but I guess where I'm working more at the moment in surgery, it's actually a much more proactive workspace where feedback is, surgeons are very highly trained, and actually it's really interesting going through this leadership stuff because I think it's part of their journey to have to become leaders, because they are.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess, and we're doing a heap of stuff for DAF at the moment. Most people come to DAF from a very highly scientific skill base, but to progress in the organization, they need to broaden their soft skills or their power skill base to be more effective, giving feedback, communication, team building, all of those sort of things as well. And it's interesting. So in the operating environment, you're all there together. And is it a good team environment where people feel they can chip in, or does the seniority of surgeons hush the room to a certain extent and things?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because you can see the old school surgeons who are more like the paternalistic sort of vibe, and the newer generation who have gone through the the more modern and it's increasingly modern every sort of year, or every 5 years, the cohort are just a bit younger and sharper and more sensitive, and the jokes are less dirty and more PC.
Good to see it's all evolving
Yeah.
in the operating theatre, which is really good as well. How do you go? Let's go with you, Trudy. So you're at CSU now too. How are you finding feedback giving and receiving in the CSU environment?
It's probably a little bit non-existent, actually. We're, I guess, in a support role working to assist academics, but there's no avenue for feedback to come back in terms of what the outcome of that work product was, how that support enabled students or anything else. So it's something I've certainly been pushing in my time there, is to say, how do we close this loop to actually get that and know what can I do better? So it is lacking very much. There's probably an abundance from people that you don't want to hear from.
Outside the arena?
Yeah, and that's where I think it really helps to remove the possessive language when you're giving that sort of feedback, instead of saying your report or your presentation, to remove it to thee and they and that sort of thing, to just try and quell that personalisation. But yeah, it could certainly be stepped up. We just stick to the annual review, really, which you've already mentioned.
Yeah, and I do find that quite bizarre for what should in theory be a quite progressive organisation, and would sort of think themselves progressive in many other spaces. But then I know just in amongst the academics that I work with, and I don't get performance reviewed because I'm a casual, but it's a crazy week in the lead up to that 1 hour meeting that they're going to have. And really for 50 other weeks of the year, they don't really think about it, or it's not managed, or it's not offered, and feedback is scant in the School of Business, for example. So it's had, and imagine how well, a bit of feedback about how the students receive your work and how the academic works with that work you've done could close the loop on a better outcome for students, which is really what a university is there to do for that. So it's interesting, massive amount of upside in terms of what students what feedback could bring us, I think, in the workplace as well.
Sorry, can I ask something? What happens with those feedback forms that all the students fill at the end of the semester? Do they get looked at?
Well, they do buy this, and you would probably know more, Andrew. They do buy whoever in faculty can, but we're at a pay grade too low to receive any of that, which is crazy, really, because that's what we're designing to, being an educational designer. That's what we need to do. So it's filtered. I don't actually know where it goes to.
Yeah.
Good question.
Well, very, very, very few people see it. And to Paz's point, many, many more people should see it. I would see mine. No other academic has ever, I'm 22 years with the university, shared a review from a subject that they've done previously, or at the same time, or in parallel, or even a different cohort. So it's based out of Wagga, or it's based out of Bathurst. I've never seen anyone else's work in terms of a review. And my head of school potentially could look at them, but there would be 100 different subjects times the number of students evaluation forms done. So I know that they're not looking at them either. So evaluations which the students are doing are important, but they're not delivering the impact that they should by a long, long, long shot. So now you've moved out of that side of things, Paz. We can reveal that to you, but it's kind of disappointing. We should do that. We should actually have some live dashboards, and people should be looking at data around that. But what's more likely to happen is that they do have a system now which the data is looked at a high level, and if I give too many people HDs or fail too many people, I'll likely be chastised for that and asked to relook at my marking style. So that's the kind of slightly downside. There might be good value in me doing that sometimes, but also it's more of a stick rather than a carrot approach to how that kind of works out. So yeah, interesting. And lots of again, like communication, feedback is such a simple, and humans would be super capable at it. And, on the walk to the coffee shop or back, can be a lot of information shared, which could really make everyone stay more productive about that. So that's why you guys are going to be soldiers for that cause, and you're going to be awesome feedback givers. I do recommend to other people, the place that I started practicing my feedback lots was every time, you buy a product and someone sends you a survey, can you tell us how we rated on this? Use that as an opportunity to practice your feedback. Yeah, you can give them star ratings and all that sort of thing. But when you start to fill in the box, which has got a bit of open-ended text space there, think about crafting your language. So if I actually wanted to make a difference here, I could write, your product sucks, I'm never shopping from you again. Or I could write, wow, I found some of the features of the product not very high performance. I found your customer service staff to be, erratic, maybe in behavior. And I'd really like to see them trained up more and solve the quality problem on that issue. There'd be a lot better feedback you could give if you thought it through. So I definitely use, marketing surveys as a tool to practice giving feedback. And from that, we've gone on, in our Airbnb business, we're giving feedback all the time to people who have stayed. And I'm quite crafty with how I do that and the language I use and the words I use to help make that a positive, but also when we have guests that maybe don't do the normal Airbnb thing, we can share that message with them, but without slapping them down about it. So tricky, but getting better at it all the time. And I'll be better at giving feedback tomorrow than I was today. So that's hopefully a good thing. Two things to wrap up before I hand over the mic to Paz is, I think there's three things actually. This is a Brene Brown piece for those people who are Brene Brown fans. And I do recommend everybody should either read a book or listen to Dare to Lead, for example, which is where this is from. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And so again, like the James Clear thing, we want to, as much as it might be a tough conversation, we want to be as clear and as transparent about what we need to communicate as possible, and straightforward, appropriate level of language for the situation. Don't leave gray areas that can happen, because when people can understand, then you can act on that understanding, and that's a really valuable thing. The second one, which is the Brene Brown piece as well, is the circle back opportunity. I think sometimes we get into situations where we, our emotional intelligence might be diminishing, conflict might be rising, and Paz is going to talk about that for us a little bit as well. We don't pull the pin early enough on some of those conversations and step back. And Brene's circle back thing is about identifying really early on when things are not going where you need them to go. And instead of letting things derail and emotional outbursts and all the things that might happen, we actually pull back from that really quickly, and we let people go and take a break, have a stretch, get a coffee, sleep on it, go and do more research, get more evidence on the thing that they're talking about, and we circle back around. And that might be 1 hour, it might be one afternoon, it might be the next morning. It's not a huge amount of time. We're not going to circle back in the next week or so, but we come back around quite quickly when everyone's had a chance to regroup on the information that needs to be shared in that space around, what is potentially a difficult conversation that otherwise, ends up with people being maybe ostracized or not feeling engaged, or trust is diminished and all of those kind of things. So circle back is a really cool tool that allows everyone to call time on stuff and nobody to get upset about calling time, and we regroup and we come back again and solve the problem in the next iteration of that one as well. So a couple of things, a little bit of homework for you. Have a conversation with somebody who's close to you without your mobile phone in your hand. So practice doing that one and see what happens with that. I would like to see you consciously find someone at work or someone you work with, a colleague, and try the I like, I wonder thing. Do it with your family as well if you'd like to do that. And then also, I want people to seek out some feedback from someone close to you, someone who's in the arena with you about any part of the world that you're working in, and do it on the way to having a coffee in the morning, do it at the end of the day, do it at the beginning of the day over the water cooler, whatever it might be, and seek feedback from somebody and see how they go delivering that. You can kind of be informed on how they're going to go with that. Is it a great trust building exercise? Is the feedback useful for you? Did they blow you off? How did that unfold for you? And if we do more of those kind of things, we'll all get better into that particular space as well. Yay, that's kind of my bit for tonight, which is fantastic. Now, I've invited along Paz tonight to chat with us. Paz and I have only had a kind of a brief interaction, really, because Paz has been a student in the CSU MBA program, and you graduated last year, did you, Paz? Or was it just this year?
This year, actually, yeah.
Perfect, well done. And as a mentor for Paz, and that's what I like to call myself in terms of a lecturer in the subjects, but as a mentor in, I think it was project management would have been. Paz was an impressive student. And that's why I've written that she's on board and committed down there. I've seen her involved in a couple of things, both as a student and then watching her on LinkedIn. When she gets into something, she's into it and she's committed to it. And I really like that about Paz, and which is why she's a beautiful speaker to be on tonight. She has expertise in dispute resolution and conflict management, which is awesome also, because we haven't discussed those things, and positions herself through those kind of roles as a problem solver. And I think that's a really nice way to capture things as well. Paz told me this afternoon, Paz is of Spanish origin, and it means for peace. Peace and Paz is beautiful, and you're a dispute resolver. So how well does that work for you, Paz? That's great.
Yeah, and it's thanks, Andrew, for that. Thanks for having me and inviting me. Paz means peace in Spanish, and it's quite funny because when I did start my dispute resolution studies at CSU, I was really into the peace side of things, which we all had a laugh at when it was my first subject, and I really loved reading all about the research that has been done into peace negotiations and conflict overseas and international relations. So yeah, it's quite interesting that my career has focused on disputes. I did finish my master's this year, just last month actually. And I've been working in disputes for around about just over 10 years. But when I think about it, when you think about your career, there's always complaints. There's always negotiations involved. So, and that you're always dealing with either customers or your external stakeholders, internal stakeholders. You're trying to find options. You're trying to find solutions that can assist with whatever the issues are at that stage. So I think everyone's got experience in trying to resolve disputes or complaints, yeah, it's how you tackle them and how you manage those disputes, so it can lead to, I guess, you know, a solution that everyone's happy with. So thank you once again for having me. I wanted to just briefly touch on a couple of those things that you said, Andrew. You spoke about feedback, and it's quite interesting because that framework that you actually put up, the CEBA framework, that actually also relates to the assertive statements in conflict resolution. And it's using a lot of those I statements. And Brene Brown, those quotes that you put up, they're also using those I statements. And a lot of conflict resolution is trying to be proactive and not reactive. So when you are speaking with someone, it's really important to use that positive language to turn it around and to try and not react, and try and you know, listen, acknowledge, and reframe what you've heard, trying to use that assertive language. So really interesting. I'm interested to know how many people deal with disputes here. Rolly, do you get a lot of disputes in your medical field?
Thankfully not, actually. I mean, I've been in surgery the last 2 years and all my patients are asleep, so that makes things easy.
Yeah, I guess a lot of them would go to the health commissioner, no?
Yeah, there's a few different avenues of making complaints about health outcomes. It's certainly very regulated, but I fortunately haven't been on the receiving end of any, nor made any. So pathways.
And Trudy, how about the university complaints? Well, what happens with those? Because there's going to be an ombudsman appointed, is that right, to the university complaints?
Look, I believe so. That's sort of an area that within the student-facing side would get a lot more, I believe. my division's sort of fairly sheltered from that. But yeah, it's interesting. My husband's a paramedic as well, so they have quite a different complaints that can come through general public, patients, bystanders, peers, and the rest as well. So that's interesting, always chatting to him as it comes through, and the investigation that might take part in the discussion that takes part with that. So
yeah. Yeah, they're all got, I guess every industry has a different framework and different policies, different legislation that has to be followed as well. Linda, what do you do? And what kind of complaints do you get, if any?
I work in an engineering firm, local engineering firm. We've got 13 staff. And it's interesting that we've changed our meeting and feedback basically process. And when I first started there, they had monthly meetings, and people had come and they'd say, oh, 3 weeks ago this happened or that happened. And if they didn't say that, then nothing was said. It was all very quiet and everyone sat with their arms crossed, and it was a very strange thing for me to walk into. But I tried to lighten the load by bringing cake, and I thought, we'll have a cake and that might lighten it up a bit, but it didn't really. It just made focus on the cake. But now we've changed and we've gone to daily meetings, and it's just 10 minutes first thing in the morning, and it's a time when they can just say, well, yesterday this happened and I didn't like it, and we address the issues straight away. And the whole demeanour and everything has changed with staff morale. Everything has changed with just having that 10-minute 8 o'clock meeting where you can talk about what's bothering you like right now. So it's really interesting.
And I guess you would address any blockers that are going on for, for staff at the day. Yeah, and like you said, it changes employees. So there's greater productivity in the end. There's greater increased job satisfaction. There's
everything.
And
I don't have to bring cake.
Yeah, exactly. Just coffee, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I'm also an accredited mediator, so I have conciliated and mediated banking disputes. So I did work for the banking ombudsman, and part of my role was to mediate complaints between the banks, certain financial institutions, and the public. So, and that was, sorry, Marilyn, sorry, I missed what you said. Huh?
I'm so sorry. I was talking to the pup that's landed on my lap. I'm so sorry. She's knocked the mute button off. I do apologize.
No, all good. And we missed out. I missed out on hearing what you do. Do you get many complaints?
I do get lots of complaints. I'm in aged care.
Okay.
So we just deal with them as they come in. Some of them have to go to the government, depending on what the issue might be, and others get resolved internally. So it is a bit of a mixture.
Yeah, so the Aged Care Commissioner, they're going through some reform at the moment as well. Yeah, so I joined AFCA, the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, when the Royal Commission, just after the Royal Commission into the banking industry happened. And I thought it was a good opportunity to try and help those people that didn't get help from the banks when they needed help. So it was a good time, and I did learn a lot. And I guess one of the things that I learned was that many of the disputes just became bigger because there was a lack of communication, there was miscommunication, and their problems were just ignored or not understood. And I just, after many years of working in disputes, I feel that if people just stop, listen, and try and acknowledge and identify what the issues are, many can get resolved fairly quickly and not blown up into something bigger than what the issue was. One of the important things about disputes is not letting the emotions get in the way. And it's very difficult when you have challenging I guess, complainants or challenging behaviours that they display. And a lot of it is trying to recognise what the triggers are. So when I do talk about disputes, I always tell people, and when I'm coaching new staff, I always tell them that it's to try and identify what the triggers are. So challenging behaviour can be intrinsic or it could be extrinsic. You just don't know, but they give it away. They give it away fairly early just by their behaviours. And a lot of it is, but if you're experiencing that challenging behaviour, it's really important not to react. And one of the things that I do when I've got a difficult complainant or a challenging complainant is I stop and I let them just talk. I listen, and then I try and reframe what they say, so then I'm not reacting to what they're saying. When I first started in disputes, I actually did, I used to react. I used to just let it get to me. But I did learn that it was important to take the emotion out, really identify what the issues were, and really clarify what was going on. I also thought it was good to maybe separate yourself a little bit and really try and build some sort of rapport with people as well. So and that could be like just, you know, not letting them take over and just letting them know that, you know, I have got a time limit today. I can't speak for more than 5 minutes. I've got to go to a meeting, you know, and setting those boundaries. So I think when you are dealing with challenging complainants, you really got to look after yourself, set those boundaries, do acknowledge, do listen, do reframe, and really try and separate yourself from the issues. What are some challenging behaviours that people have experienced? Has anyone dealt with any complaints or disputes that have been quite challenging?
Do 4-year-olds count?
Yes, yes, they do, you know. We're always negotiating with the kids.
I always
Should we
find
negotiate with
that
children or not? Sorry.
yeah, I always find it hard to diffuse a situation when it's over the telephone. Like if I get a person ringing me who's irate or upset about something, how to diffuse it without being face to face. Like,
yeah,
I find that always quite difficult.
Yeah. So what do you usually do? Do you react? Do you find yourself reacting, or?
I try not to, and I find that if I am reacting, I tend to sort of say that I need to put them on hold and just kind of just cut myself away from it. So I'll put them on hold and then I'll just, you know, collect myself a bit and then come back again. And they're either crankier or they've calmed down a little bit. But yeah, it's not ideal.
Look, many of my conciliations were done over the phone. And I did get I've had some challenging complainants that I've had to conciliate, and I've had to stop. I've had to say to them, I've had to give them a few warnings and say, you know, because they wouldn't let the other party speak. So as a conciliator and a mediator, I had to facilitate between both parties. And when there's one that has definitely a power, when there's some power imbalance in the conciliation, you definitely have to control that and try and, you know, set those boundaries. So I always begin by trying to make some, you know, just spell out what the rules are, you know, and just mention that, you know, you have to give people time to speak, don't speak over each other, and give some time out as well. So I think that's great, Linda, that you put them on hold and not react, and give them some time to just calm down a bit. And obviously you don't want to be patronizing as well. You don't want to say, well, I'm going to put you on hold because I think you need some time out. That's a good way of, I guess, calming that person down, and coming back
and
to it.
calming myself down. Like,
That's right.
you know, yeah, you just need to take a breath and just go, okay, well, you know, this person's cranky, but I need to sort out how I'm going to speak to them.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess if people well, I don't know, is anyone running for council in this group? Not yet. No one.
Not this
No one's
year.
got the courage.
Rolly's about to step up.
Not this year, but you know, we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe you.
Because if you are, you will get complaints. You'll be getting complaints from the ratepayers, the residents, you know, you'll be getting complaints about you, you know, and, you know, some people are really threatening. They threaten, I'm going to go to the media, or I'm going to go to the ombudsman, I'm going to go to the minister. But it's really important not to take it personally, and just try and understand that some of those behaviours can be managed. And a lot of the time it's because of a small issue. They just blow it up and it's all about the emotion. But I don't know whether anyone's heard of William Ury. He's an international negotiator. He's written a few books about negotiation, and he's a peacekeeper. Does a lot of international work, and advises, you know, a lot of the diplomats in terms of negotiation techniques. He actually has this technique, which I absolutely love, and he says it's one of his steps for diffusing a dispute is by going to the balcony. He uses the term going to the balcony. So if you've got a dispute amongst parties, you go to the balcony, you look and you try and work out what the sides are, but you know, what each party is trying to what they're trying to do, what they're needing.
We just lost your sound, Paz. You might have either gone on mute or something's happened with your microphone there.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
You're back.
How long have I been on mute?
Just a few seconds.
Did you hear William Ury's going to the balcony?
We got that too.
Oh, okay.
I just Googled him and put his name in the list. That's how you spell it. So if you want to Google him and negotiator. I bet he's got 1,000 jobs on at the moment. There's plenty of political negotiations.
Yeah.
So want to be a busy man. Yeah,
he has this term, going to the balcony, which I always try and use, and it's basically separating yourself, having a look at the dispute, having a look at the issues, reframing them, acknowledge, don't react, And I think it's quite a useful thing to remember when you're dealing with complainants. I don't know, Andrew. What were you gonna? Did you have
I've
something
got a
to
couple
share?
of questions maybe to
Yeah,
finish off on, Paz.
sure.
One of the things that's going to happen for people who look to going into like a more of a council role, and Michelle, our first guest speaker, sort of reinforced this, that you're going to run into some pretty tough personalities
Yeah.
in the kind of work environment. Have you got any advice for people on how to deal with, you know, and I guess to a certain extent, it's a power imbalance. It's definitely a gender imbalance in many ways. Have you got some advice for people on that, on how to handle it, how to position themselves? Yeah, exactly. Anything on that?
Yeah, I would just say that you don't react, you listen. You try and see their side. So you're acknowledging what they're saying. You wait, you maintain eye control. And I think that's very powerful if you're seeing them in person. If it's over the phone, yeah, I would suggest that you just, just listen contently and just reframe and I guess paraphrase what they're saying, but in a positive, in a positive manner. So using those assertive statements, using those eyes. So if they're challenging, if they're yelling at you, and you say, "Well, when you're yelling at me, I really don't know what you're wanting. So let's change that. Tell me and help me understand what you're wanting." You know, what do you want to see out of this dispute? Where do you want to go from here? Let me see what I can do. So try and use those statements, try and really reframe what's being said, and confirm understanding, and I guess respond with empathy. It's about trying to build trust. I don't know whether I would say that you trust them, but it's about trying to build that relationship with them and or a bit of rapport, and utilizing that so then they can diffuse their behaviors, and so it gets a little bit easier for you. There will be, let's be realistic, there will be some challenging people out there. But I think with those instances, you just have to maintain control and just not react, because a lot of them are pushing your buttons. A lot of them just want you to react. They just want to see that. So if you just don't do it, then they'll change their behaviors. So then they can, because they're trying to get what they want. And I think a lot of those type of people that are challenging, they're really positional bargainers, because they just want what they want. So it is a challenge trying to turn them, but it's about asking those questions, trying to collaborate, trying to communicate with them effectively, and listening to what the issues really are. That's my advice.
Cool.
I
I like that
sometimes
one. The
think that
positional bargaining
also,
thing is interesting because you can imagine in local government, lots of people have lots of different positions, whether they're represented by the community or different facets of the community. I think that's like a really interesting thing. And once you, like we talked about stakeholders last week, particularly, and you do a bit of a plan about them and work out what their vision or what their position is, then you can have a bit of a strategy on how to do that. The other thing I wanted to add to that point, Paz, was that Brene Brown in her books talks a lot about boundaries. There's no need to put yourself out on a limb to serve somebody else's purpose, really. So you need to be quite careful about constructing workable boundaries about where you will go, where you won't go, where you'll be pushed, where you won't be pushed, I suppose, to maintain your own confidence and your own positive esteem at the end of the day as well, but also so other people understand where you're at. So that's your position, I guess, on those things as well. Excellent. Have you got one or two points you want to wrap up with tonight?
Yeah, I think my last point would be debrief. Really important to debrief when you've got challenging complaints, and talk to your colleagues, get it out, you know. If it's too challenging, if it's a telephone one, Linda, tell them to write in. Get them to write, I'm sorry, I can't, you know, when you speak to me like that, I can't assist you. How about you send me an email? And that may be better. So try and use other options or other tools that you've got. So, you know, you can separate that. Yeah, so, and debrief, really important. Talk to your colleagues, get support. And, you know, we're all learning. And every complaint, I'm always saying, oh, well, maybe I could have handled that one better. So we're all human. So, yeah, keep learning, I guess. And they get easier. They do, really do. Yeah.
Certainly the first one, I'm guessing, or the, you know, early ones when you're not really planning your way through it are going to be very difficult and confronting and emotionally draining and all of those sort of things too. And I guess in this kind of local government space, you've got the council itself, partially an adversary. You've got the community who you want to represent, but there's so many different points of view. You want to rally and try and get some level of consensus, I think. But I think the consensus thing is not always the best option, but transparency about why people would agree or don't agree builds trust, because people can go, well, that's your point of view. Okay, you're sticking with it. Let's go with that too. Excellent, Paz. We'll give you a little clap for that. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming along tonight and helping us out. This is a story, and it's not related to Rolly at all, but there was a great example of one of the, you know, they have a series of veterans hospitals in the US, I believe. And this was early 2000s. This veteran hospital was running more than a couple of $1 million a year in insurance claims. And their approach was completely confrontational with the families of the people who they'd usually died or something or other, or had poor treatment. They flipped their model around where they said, we're going to self-insure, we're going to deal with all these claims ourselves. And they went from, and this early 2000s, so a couple of million was still a fair bit of money then. But their next year after, they agreed to sit down with all the families of the people who'd been affected by the misadventure or the death or whatever veterans were facing in the US at that particular point in time. They reduced their financial cost back to just under $100,000 in the first year. And they had 1,000% better PR about their hospital because they got into negotiation, they listened carefully, and they made things happen. And I think the William Ury story is cool too. That TEDx talk, which I just pumped up there, that's about the power of listening. So it's an awesome way to finish off tonight, that we're thinking about listening and then how we give feedback in a more constructive kind of way. So thank you everyone for coming along. Thank you very much, Paz, for making an effort to talk about those things with us as well. And thank you other guys for all being here with us. I much appreciate it. I'll look forward to seeing you back here next week at about 7:30 on Tuesday night again for our last session. Rich is coming along for that one. Rich is a really interesting individual. He and I have known each other for about 30 years or so. We first met about some web development stuff, which is like at a cutting edge on. And since then, he's gone on to do a huge amount of communication stuff. He's got a couple of his own authoring ventures going on. So really interesting individual and a communications professional. So I'm sure you'll all enjoy him as a finish off treat for our course as well next week. So thanks everyone. I've turned